Hi, and welcome once again to the west coast of India. I'm Joseph, and this is Uday. In this episode of The Coast, we will see how trade and commerce from across the seas has helped shape the destiny of this coast, and how its most powerful magnet has been that precious commodity which grows abundantly on the hills yonder, but which is scarce everywhere else in the world, the spice. But for this commodity, this coastline behind me would have worn a very different look today. The spice trade began early enough, right from the Roman times. Adventurers have come to these shores regularly since then, seeking to make their fortunes from its trade. Today we will take a look at the different places along the coast where this trade has concentrated and how its commerce has impacted upon the lives of the communities living on the coast. We would also see how the then maritime powers that controlled this trade sought to fortify themselves in order to protect their trade interests along the coast.
Our story begins in Mattancherry, the hub of the spices trade. Mattancherry is a town within a town, and it is in Kochi. In this quaint and delightful place, nothing much has changed down the centuries. The narrow streets, well known to the merchants for ages, still remains, and so do the old buildings. Spices continues to be the business here.
And the waters of the coast, whether they be of the high seas or of the backwaters, continue to be the main conduit for that business. Vasco da Gama had landed on this coast exactly half a millennium ago, this year in 1498. But trade between Europe and the coast had pre-existed the landing of Vasco da Gama by over 2,000 years. The spices of the coast had begun and sustained this trade. The spices went west, and the gold and the wealth of Europe flowed into India. Pepper is black gold. A ton of it costs about 2 lakhs of rupees in India today, and several times more at their selling points abroad. Indeed, for over 2,000 years, the wealth of this coast and a large part of its history has been molded by the spice trade.
The people from outside came here thousands of years ago, attracted by our resources, pepper, spices, later on teak and tusks, elephant tusks, which is mentioned even perhaps in the Bible. And we, on our part, went out also. When they came for spices, pepper, a person who had 2 pounds of pepper, we call, those days it was pounds, was enough for the whole family to live for a month. But we didn't think of growing rice, while our people on the coast took their boats out and went to Karnataka, Andhra, and brought rice. This is the basic economy of our people.
Periyare, Periyare, Parvada nirayude paninire, Kulirum konda kunungi nadakkum, Malayali pennanu nee, Oru Malayali pennanu nee. We are on the banks of Periyar, the most important river in Kerala. At the mouth of this river is the little town of Kodungalur, which was once known all over the world as the port of Muciris. For many centuries, traders came calling to Muciris, until a great flood on this river blocked up the entrance to that harbour. The flood simultaneously opened up a new harbour a few miles down south at Cochin. Cochin then took off from where Muciris left off.
Cochin took off rather fast. It expanded in area and importance and became the new port of call on the west coast. On the one hand, the network of rivers and backwaters linked it with the spice-growing areas of the hinterland. And on the other, its natural harbour linked it with the seaways and ports of Europe. Cochin is today the second most important port on the west coast, second only to Bombay. After touching many parts of the west coast, Vasco da Gama finally came to Cochin in 1503. The Portuguese whom he led in were quickly followed by the Dutch and then the English. The Rajas of Cochin, eclectic as ever, welcomed all these visitors as the new agents of trade. Vasco lived on in Cochin and died here.
Actually, in Kerala and in India, the first place where the Europeans came was near Calicut. However, Cochin has a much better natural harbour. It's probably among the best natural harbours anywhere in the world. And that is why gradually the port of Cochin grew in its importance in terms of both military as well as commercial interests. The trade gradually shifted entirely to Cochin, and to protect the trade interest, the military interest also came in.
One of the oldest churches of modern India was built in Fort Cochin, where it still stands.
The church was started as a Catholic church. It was constructed in the beginning of the 16th century, and when Vasco da Gama died in 1625, if I'm not mistaken, on Christmas Eve, he was buried there. So that means that as of today, the church is over 400 years old and over 350 years old. And this church, Vasco da Gama remained buried there for several years, and then his bones were exhumed from the place and then taken on to Portugal, where they were buried.
The Europeans were, of course, the most visible group on the coast, and their influence the most predominant. But the coast did not confine its trade only with Europe. There were regular contacts with the Chinese and with the Far East, exports as well as imports. The Chinese fishing nets that are ubiquitous along many parts of the coast is proof of these exchanges. There are some new imports coming into the west coast through its ports, which are really exports. These imports come in the form of large luxury liners that bring in tourists who are increasingly making the west coast a regular port of call. Another interesting modern-day export from the coast is a commodity that is later re-imported with greater value addition, the export of manpower. The wealth that this export brings in is visible all too well along the coast, but never more so than at Chavakad, a tiny Muslim town. New houses, most of them charming and beautiful, but some garish and brazen, display this new wealth. It is transforming the coastal countryside and changing people's lifestyles. Coastal lifestyles are also changing because of another export. Fishing has always been big business along the coast. In many ways, it links the coast together. Their exports to Western markets is, however, of recent origin. It has added wealth to the coast while changing the lives of not only the rich exporters, but also of the hardy fisherfolk on the coast. Traditional fishing continues to predominate, but more and more modern mechanized vessels are being used. Many exclusive fishing harbors have also come up and are now dotted along the coast. Seaborne trade has shaped the destiny of the coast in more ways than one. One of its most significant byproducts has been the shipbuilding industry that it spawned on the coast. Drawing upon the traditional skills and techniques handed over to them, Indian shipbuilders on the coast have cleverly adapted Arabian ideas of shipbuilding to local conditions. We saw the results at Beypore near Calicut. Called the brick, this is an adaptation of the Arab dhow.
Uday, I don't believe this. This is a huge old boat and I feel like an ancient mariner. It's like being on Noah's Ark, except that the animals are not there. This is, I am told, called an Uri. What is it all about? It's a boat, of course, but what is it all about and why is it being built here?
Well, some animals are on it, you and I. And it's a pretty beautiful boat. And it's an old craft, according to an old design. And it's based on the design of the Arab dhow.
Okay.
But this is called a barik, not a uri. There are subtle differences between these boats. And this one is modern.
Okay.
It's got it will eventually be equipped with an 850 horsepower motor. A Caterpillar imported from the United States. And where will they fit it? They'll fit it in Dubai, not here. They're going to tow this all the way there to fit the best marine diesel engine available in the world. And they intend using it for trade.
Do they have a design or something according to which they build it? How many? I'm told it takes about 2 years to build it. Is that true? Or
The time frame is flexible, but yes, they don't have a design on paper. It's all in the head of Mr. Narayanan, who is the head carpenter for this, and he has been at this job for 40 years. I only hope, I believe that this is the last order for a boat in Jaipur for the present. But I hope they'll get some more by the time they complete work here.
Growing extinct here.
But I hope not.
That will be a terrible day.
And this industry, of course, has given a very beautiful vessels, I can say, not only to the India, but also to the Gulf and the other trading countries. So this vessel we will be carrying or manufacturing, you can say, to trade it between Dubai, India, Somalia, as well as in the Gulf, Persian Gulf, for the cargo, for carrying the cargo and all. This type of vessels actually last for more than 50 years. Those who have taken care of this type of vessels, even lasting for 100 years also. And these vessels, if you comparatively, if you see this, a steel ship and this type of vessels, once it's launched in the water or in the sea, you don't have to look at back. But whereas for the steel vessels, for every 3 years, the special survey has to be done. And the surveyor, definitely they will go for the survey and they will recommend you, this plate has to be changed, that plate has to be changed, lot of expenses will carry out. But whereas this type of vessels, once it is landed in the water, then you don't have to look at least for 5 to 10 years. But only thing is, for what are the requirements it is there to be provided, which is necessary. For instance, the fish oil, for every 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, you have to provide it. Then this vessel is going to be stronger and stronger, stronger and stronger. That means you have to take like a baby. You have to care for like a baby, this vessel.
The maritime tradition of the coast is many centuries old. Europeans who came to the coast had to contend with it. This they did by backing their trade with a strong military presence. Thus sprang up along the coast a series of fortifications, examples of which can still be seen. Some are rather small and humble, as the ones at Anjengo and Tangasheri. Others are rather large and majestic, like the fort in the town of Talisheri. And the fort at Fort Cochin. This fort, with 7 bastions, was one of the largest fortifications on the coast. It commanded an impressive view of the entrance to the Cochin harbour and was of immense strategic value for any defensive or offensive action on the seas. But perhaps the finest example of European defensive architecture along the coast is Fort St. Angelo at Kannur, built by the Portuguese in the early 16th century. It is a formidable bastion with a spectacular view from the sea and is one of the finest of its kind on the west coast. Within the fort, there are well-preserved buildings that were once used for the storage of goods and armaments. Several of the cannons, many facing inland, are in place and can still be seen. Whether viewed from the sea or from land, the brute power that the structure exudes is overwhelming. Its defenses appear formidable and impregnable. The Portuguese, apart from building up forts, also tried to establish a perversive system of exclusive maritime trade control over the coastal waters.
They behaved so badly to Samarin. Samarin was told, you will go and get pepper and spices at such and such a price and bring it to us. He was shocked that our king would be told to do this. It is then that Muhammad Ali, who was in Quilon, came to Samarin, I kept a sword, said, I am at your disposal. And he started the navy. And he and his brother, he was called Kunyali Marakar. Marakar naturally is the leader of the ships, and Kunyali is an endearing term. Now he built up the navy. Kunyali Marakar, who started guerrilla warfare in the sea. We could not fight them. We had no gunpowder. We had no guns. But still for 100 years we held them at bay.
The coast has always assimilated the many cultural influences that reached it from across the seas and from inland. But Hinduism was always vibrant here. It is ever present. The Sri Krishna temple at Guruvayur draws devotees from all across the country. The rulers of Cochin, Travancore and Calicut were always Hindus, but they kept their lands open for different communities. These communities coexist in harmony even today, each celebrating the festivals of the other, but always preserving their separate identities and rarely ever intermarrying. The Jews were one of the first communities to have come to the coast. Fleeing persecution in Israel, the Jews in large numbers landed at Museris over 2,000 years ago. The local king welcomed them and granted them land and protection in perpetuity. In Jewtown in Cochin today, there are not many Jews left. Sam Halagua is one such old-timer of Jewtown.
That even if I were given a chance of living in a penthouse in Bombay or Delhi, I would still prefer to live in Cochin and in the street.
Would you like to go a little further away to Israel?
I don't want to leave India, to be honest.
What holds you back?
I'm Indian, and my family has been in Cochin for 400 years. And 400 years of loyalty can't be just thrown away like that.
The Jews are a fast vanishing community on the coast today. Like Jews all over the world, the Jews here learn and understand Hebrew, but they have little doubt about what their mother tongue is.
We are part and parcel of the people here.
You speak Malayalam very well, isn't it?
Yes, of course.
Do all the Jews here
Oh,
speak
yes,
Malayalam?
yes.
Which is your first language?
Malayalam.
Mother tongue? is-
Mother tongue Malayalam.
is
Malayalam.
English is, you picked it
Yeah,
up.
we picked up in
Everybody
school.
else in India.
Yes, in school.
The decline in their numbers further hastens the process of migration of the younger generations. They are not always bound for Israel.
It's not a question of leaving the country. The difficulties of marriage, that is a big problem. In fact, both my children are in the United States. That happened more as an accident than anything else. In a way, I'm not unhappy that they went there. My son is married, and he could never have found a partner here. My daughters are still unmarried. My daughter is still unmarried. So that is the main thing that keeps, probably makes the younger people leave.
Another form of the diaspora affected the Gauda Saraswat Brahmins. Fleeing the religious persecution of the Portuguese, they dispersed themselves from their homelands in the Konkan. They can be seen all along the west coast today.
When the Portuguese conquered Goa and started harassment, we had to leave Goa for a better place.
In that process, we left Goa with our deities by sea route and made our own settlements throughout the seashore from Karwar, Sirsi, Honavar, Mangalore, Calicut, Cochin, and you can say up to Trivandrum. Maharaja of Cochin was kind enough to allot us the land and we settled here. There was no need of going in search of any other occupation during that period.
Islam is strongly present on the coast. It came here immediately after the death of the Prophet, not as invaders, but peacefully as traders. It has mostly coexisted with the other faiths here and has integrated fully with the land. The Muslim women of the coast, though at times traditional in attire, is modern in attitude and outlook. The synthesis is most visible in the unique Islamic architecture on the coast, which blends naturally with their surroundings. Contrast the muted and gentle expressions in the architecture of the mosques on the coast with the huge structures and the blatant styles of architecture of their counterparts elsewhere in the country. Another example of this assimilation has been the process by which existing family structures have been borrowed into the daily life of Muslims of the coast. One of the oldest Muslim Tarawads on the coast is that of the Maliekal family. Over 100 members live in this Tarawad. Many Muslim Tarawads on the coast also follow the matrilineal system of the Hindu Nayars, giving their women an importance unparalleled amongst Muslims anywhere else in the world. Their women have even adopted a variation of the Kaikoti Kali, a slow-moving group dance form of the local Hindu women. The Maliekal family is also one of the earliest Muslim families where girls were educated. No wonder then that in this house the Quran is recited by women. There have been a few Muslim kingdoms on the coast too, as for example the Arakel Rajas of Kannur. These kings were no less open-minded and Catholic in their outlook as their neighboring Hindu kings. Never very powerful or rich, their palaces are crumbling and coming apart today. Trade influenced the coast and the country in many interesting ways. The traders had brought with them their sports and their games, one of which has become such an obsessive part of our present daily life that we no longer see it as an impact of trade.
Did you know that it was the Duke of Wellington who brought cricket into India? And that the first game of cricket on this subcontinent was played in a little town of Tellicherry, just north of Calicut, in this very ground nearly 200 years ago? And did you know that the Duke's team consisted of his dhobies, his cooks, and the local fisher folk? That's history for you.
One of the most important impact of trade and commerce on the coast has been the new learning that it brought to these shores. Systematic scientific thinking of the European model was, for the first time, introduced here. At first, the new learning displaced the ancient learning of the land, but soon the local genius asserted itself. Without rejecting the new learning, it assimilated their best traits. It was a West Coaster, Dr. Shivaram Karanth, who fused the best of the East and the West. theatre personality, environmentalist, and the author of over 400 books, which also included dictionaries, the late Dr. Karanth was no ordinary man. His interests in the world around him came out in several ways, one of which was as an amateur geologist. His depth of knowledge of the subject was immense.
My friends provided a small boat to carry 10 or 20, came out of the estuary and dropped me here till I saw the rock formation of this area. Then I began to read about the rocks. These are rock formations, basalt oozing out of the volcanic thing, and when it cools down over millions of years, it gets crystallized then and there. So they become columns of it. Partha Yambavane Nino Yambavane Nino Partha Yambavane Nino Ninnashvava Swarthadi Kati Heno
Yennaya Mata Mannipudu Jita.
Apart from his literary achievements, Dr. Karanth is best known for having revived the dying dance form Yakshagana and for having brought it onto the world stage.
Indeed, then, trade and commerce have shaped the destiny of this coast, but in a way which neither the traders who came here nor the powers that sent them could have ever imagined.
The emphasis on learning was the most important impact of trade on the coast. It ignited an interest in education and erudition, and nowhere is it more visible than in the prolific works of the late Dr. Shivram Karanth. It is this learning which enabled states like Kerala and Goa to achieve full literacy, with Karnataka not too far behind.
There was also a renaissance of many ancient art forms like the Kathakali and an evolution of new ones like the Yakshagana. Most of all, trade and commerce gave the people of the coast a certain confidence that provided them with a head start over the rest of the subcontinent. In the next episode of The Coast, we will continue our exploration of the human and material richness of the coast. And until then, it's Uday here and me, Joseph, signing off. Goodbye.
Goodbye.